The clatter of plates, the murmur of a bustling diner, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. But what unfolded next was anything but. Sarah, a waitress with dreams as modest as her tips, found herself in a terrifying standoff, protecting a child from a stranger's sinister grip. She had no idea the boy's father was a titan of industry, a man whose gratitude would rewrite her destiny in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. This isn't just a story about bravery. It's about a hidden heart of gold, a twist of fate, and a reward that defied belief. Get ready, because this tale will make you question everything you thought you knew about everyday heroes and unexpected fortunes. The aroma of brewing coffee and sizzling bacon was Sarah Jenkins' alarm clock, long before her actual one ever chimed. At 5:30 a.m., the kitchen of The Corner Cafe, a beloved institution on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, was already a symphony of controlled chaos. Sarah, 27, with a spirit as resilient as her tired feet, navigated the narrow aisles with the grace of a seasoned dancer, balancing trays laden with steaming mugs and overflowing breakfast platters. For 7 years, the Corner Cafe had been her sanctuary, her battleground, and her unwitting stage. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, most of them anyway, and offered a semblance of stability after a childhood that had known little of it. Her parents, both free spirits, who chased dreams more elusive than a decent credit score, had left Sarah to carve out her own path early on. The cafe, with its predictable rhythm and familiar faces, had become her anchor. Today, Tuesday, August 15th, promised to be like any other. The sun was already a fierce orange ball peeking over the distant mountains, threatening to bake the city before noon. Inside, the air conditioning hummed a weak protest against the encroaching heat. Regulars were already settling into their usual booths, old Mr. Henderson with his newspaper and bottomless coffee, Mrs. Gable always gossiping with her friends over toast and marmalade, and the construction crew from the site down the road who devoured their full Monty breakfasts with a robust appetite. Sarah moved from table to table, her smile genuine, her small talk practiced. Morning, Mr. Henderson, the usual. Mrs. Gable looking lovely today. She knew their orders, their quirks, their life stories sometimes better than they knew their own. It was more than just serving food. It was a connection, a small community built on shared routines and good, honest grub. Around 8 a.m., the cafe hit its peak. The clatter intensified, the chatter rose to a happy din, and Sarah felt the familiar ache spread through her shoulders and feet. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished surface of the coffee machine. A smear of flour on her cheek, a stray strand of blonde hair escaping her ponytail, and a faint smudge under her eyes. Just another day. Sarah, she thought, wiping down the counter with practiced efficiency. Just another day. Suddenly the front door chimed, announcing a new arrival. Sarah glanced up, expecting another regular, but paused. A woman impeccably dressed in a tailored linen suit entered her eyes, scanning the room with a polite but somewhat detached air. Beside her, a young boy, no older than 5, clutched her hand. He had a mop of sandy blonde hair, wide, curious blue eyes, and wore a pristine little polo shirt and shorts. He looked like he'd stepped out of a catalogue, a stark contrast to the cafe's more rustic charm. Sarah recognized the woman faintly. She'd been in a few times over the past couple of months, always with the same quiet, well-behaved boy. Sarah remembered hearing snippets of conversation from other waitresses. The woman was a nanny, apparently, and the boy was from a very wealthy family who had recently moved into one of the sprawling estates nearby. His name, she recalled, was Arthur. Arthur Sterling. The woman whose name Sarah dimly remembered as Miss Albright led Arthur to a secluded booth in the back, away from the main rush. Sarah approached them with her pad and pen. "Good morning, Miss Albright." "Arthur." Sarah greeted her smile, unwavering. "What can I get for you two today?" Miss Albright offered a small, reserved smile. "Good morning, Sarah. Arthur will have his usual pancakes with a side of berries, please, and a glass of apple juice. And for me, just a black coffee and a bowl of oatmeal, thank you." "Coming right up." Sarah jotted down the order and headed towards the kitchen. As she walked away, she couldn't help but notice Arthur's gaze, following her, a thoughtful, innocent expression on his face. There was something about the boy, a quiet intensity, that always struck her. He was always so polite, so observant, a little old soul in a small body. As the morning wore on, Sarah served the Sterlings. Arthur ate his pancakes with a quiet enjoyment, occasionally glancing up at Miss Albright, who was engrossed in a business magazine. Sarah noticed that Arthur didn't talk much, but he would sometimes offer a shy, sweet smile when she refilled his juice. Just before noon, as the lunch rush began to build, Miss Albright excused herself to make a quick phone call outside, leaving Arthur alone in the booth, happily colouring in a small book. Sarah, bustling between tables, kept a subconscious eye on him, as she did with all the unattended children in the cafe. It was second nature, a silent, unspoken duty. The cafe was a swirl of activity, the clang of cutlery, the sizzle from the grill, the rise and fall of conversations. Sarah was just about to take a fresh pot of coffee to Mr. Henderson when the chime of the front door announced another newcomer. A man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air that immediately struck Sarah as off. He wasn't dressed like a regular, nor like the construction workers. His clothes were nondescript, a plain jacket and dark trousers, but there was a certain intensity in his gaze, a restlessness that made the hairs on Sarah's arms prickle. He seemed to scan the room, not for a table, but for something else. His eyes lingered on Arthur. A knot of unease tightened in Sarah's stomach. She had seen all sorts of people come through the cafe's doors, but this man radiated a distinct, almost predatory energy. He moved with a subtle stealth, sidling along the edge of the room, keeping his back to the wall, gradually making his way towards Arthur's booth. Sarah's heart began to thump a little faster. Miss Albright was still outside her back to the cafe, talking animatedly on her phone. Arthur was engrossed in his colouring book, oblivious. The cafe was busy, but no one else seemed to notice the man's quiet approach. He reached the booth. Sarah's breath hitched. She watched frozen for a split second as the man leaned over Arthur, a low murmur of words she couldn't quite discern. Arthur looked up, his blue eyes wide, with a mixture of surprise and confusion. Then, with a sudden, swift movement that was almost too fast to follow, the man reached down, grabbed Arthur's arm, and began to pull him out of the booth. Time seemed to slow. A silent scream tore through Sarah's mind. No. Every instinct, every fibre of her being screamed at her to act. This was not a misplaced parent, not a relative. This was wrong. Terribly, terrifyingly wrong. Without a moment's hesitation, without even a conscious thought of the consequences, Sarah dropped the coffee pot she was carrying. It landed with a muffled thud on a stray rug, miraculously not shattering, and sprinted towards the back of the cafe. "Hey!" Her voice, usually soft and melodious, was a sharp, piercing cry that cut through the cafe's din like a knife. "What do you think you're doing?" The man froze, half-turned, Arthur still clutched in his grip. His eyes, dark and cold, met Sarah's. For a terrifying moment, she saw pure, unadulterated malice in them. Arthur, startled, and now frightened, began to whimper, his small hand instinctively reaching out for help. The cafe, moments before, a symphony of everyday life, fell into an abrupt, stunned silence. Every head turned. The clatter of forks ceased. Conversations died on people's lips. All eyes were on Sarah, the stranger, and the terrified little boy. Sarah skidded to a halt a few feet from the booth, her chest heaving, adrenaline surging through her veins like wildfire. She braced herself instinctively, placing her body between the man and the exit. "Let him go," she commanded, her voice trembling slightly but firm. The man, a lean figure with surprisingly strong arms, merely tightened his grip on Arthur. Arthur let out a small sob. The man's face was a mask of grim determination, his eyes darting towards the door, then back to Sarah. He was clearly surprised by her sudden intervention. "This doesn't concern you, lady," the man snarled, his voice a low, gravelly growl. "He's my nephew. We're just having a little family discussion." Sarah's mind raced. Nephew. She knew Ms. Albright was Arthur's nanny, and Arthur's family, the Sterlings, were known to be incredibly private, almost reclusive. She'd never heard anything about a nephew visiting the cafe. Besides, the boy's terrified whimper and the man's aggressive demeanor spoke volumes. This wasn't a family discussion. It was an abduction. "I don't believe you," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a protective fury she hadn't known she possessed. "I see this boy almost every week. You are not his relative." The man's grip on Arthur tightened further, causing the boy to cry out. "Stay out of this or you'll regret it," he threatened, taking a step back, trying to maneuver Arthur towards the cafe's side exit, which led to a narrow alleyway. Sarah, however, was not backing down. She had seen the flicker of fear in Arthur's eyes, the desperate plea. She couldn't let him go. "Someone call the police," she yelled, turning her head slightly towards the stunned customers. The sound of her plea jolted the cafe's patrons out of their stupor. Old Mr. Henderson, surprisingly spry for his age, fumbled for his phone. A construction worker, a burly man named Dave, began to rise from his booth, his face etched with concern. Mrs. Gable and her friends gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. The man's eyes narrowed. He clearly hadn't anticipated such a defiant response or the sudden attention from the other patrons. He yanked Arthur harder. Arthur stumbled his small legs, struggling to keep up. "He's coming with me!" The man hissed, his voice laced with desperation, now no longer trying to maintain any pretense. Sarah knew she couldn't physically overpower him. He was taller, stronger, and clearly desperate. But she could create a diversion. She could buy time. Her eyes darted around the cafe, searching for something, anything. Her gaze landed on a tray of freshly brewed, steaming hot coffee, sitting on the counter, ready for refill. Without a second thought, Sarah lunged for it. The man, surprised by her sudden movement, faltered for a second. That was all Sarah needed. She grabbed the metal tray heavy with its full coffee pot and several mugs, and with a primal roar that surprised even herself, swung it. It wasn't a clean hit, but it connected. The edge of the tray clipped the man's shoulder, forcing him to flinch back. The hot coffee sloshed, a few drops splashing onto his arm. He cried out, not in pain, but in frustrated anger, momentarily releasing his iron grip on Arthur. Arthur, seizing the opportunity, scrambled away, darting behind Sarah and clutching onto her legs, burying his face in her apron. His small body trembled with fear. The man rounded on Sarah, his face contorted in a furious snarl. "You little witch!" he spat, taking a menacing step towards her. His hand reached into his jacket pocket. A collective gasp went through the cafe. Dave, the construction worker, was now fully on his feet, moving towards them. Mr. Henderson was clearly on the phone, his voice hushed but urgent, just as the man's hand emerged from his pocket, revealing not a weapon, but a set of car keys, clutched tightly. The front door of the corner cafe burst open with a bang. Ms. Albright stood there, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. She had heard the commotion, the shouts, and had just missed the entirety of the confrontation. Her gaze swept the room, landing on Sarah Arthur, cowering behind her, and the menacing stranger. "Arthur!" She shrieked, her earlier composure completely shattered. She rushed forward, a whirlwind of frantic energy. The man, seeing Miss Albright and realizing his window of opportunity was rapidly closing, swore under his breath. He glared at Sarah one last time, a look of pure hatred in his eyes, as if promising future retribution. Then, with a frustrated grunt, he turned and bolted out of the cafe's front door, disappearing into the blinding Arizona sun. Silence descended once more, heavy and thick, punctuated only by Arthur's soft sobs and Miss Albright's hurried footsteps. She reached Sarah and Arthur in a flash, pulling the boy into a tight, desperate embrace. "Arthur, my darling, are you all right?" She croaked, her voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down her face. She checked him over frantically, her hands shaking. Sarah, leaning against a table, felt her knees buckle. The adrenaline was slowly draining, leaving her weak and trembling. She looked down at Arthur, who was now clinging to Miss Albright, but still occasionally glancing back at Sarah, his small hand reaching out and briefly touching her apron, as if for reassurance. The police sirens, distant at first, grew steadily louder, wailing as they approached. The corner cafe. Sarah closed her eyes, taking a shaky breath. It was over. For now. She had done it. She had protected the child. But the image of the man's angry, hateful eyes lingered, a chilling reminder that some shadows stretched longer than others. The next hour at the corner cafe was a blur of flashing blue and red lights, stern-faced police officers, and hushed interrogations. Sarah, Miss Albright, and several of the cafe's patrons gave their statements recounting the terrifying events of the morning. Officer Miller, a seasoned veteran with a kind but no-nonsense demeanor, took Sarah's statement first. He listened intently, scribbling notes in his pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "So, Ms. Jenkins?" Officer Miller began his gaze, assessing. "You're certain this man was attempting to abduct the child?" Sarah nodded vehemently. "Absolutely, officer. He said he was his nephew, but Arthur was terrified, and he didn't look like any family member I've ever seen with Miss Albright." She then described the man. His height, build, the dark, intense eyes, the nondescript clothes. "He was going for the side exit towards the alley," she added, hoping it would help. Officer Miller thanked her, his expression grim. "You were very brave, Ms. Jenkins. You potentially saved that boy from a very dangerous situation." Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck. I just reacted," she mumbled, still feeling shaken. "I couldn't just stand there." Miss Albright, after comforting Arthur, who was now clinging to her like a limpet, approached Sarah. Her eyes, still red-rimmed, held a depth of gratitude that transcended words. "Sarah," Miss Albright began, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved Arthur. You put yourself in danger for him." She reached out, taking Sarah's hand in both of hers, squeezing it tightly. "His father. He's going to want to thank you, personally." Sarah waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, no need, Miss Albright. I just did what anyone would do." Though a small part of her felt a flutter of curiosity about the billionaire dad everyone whispered about. "No, Sarah, you really don't understand," Miss Albright insisted, her eyes serious. "Mr. Sterling he's a very powerful man, and Arthur is everything to him. He will want to express his gratitude." She then pulled out a small, ornate business card from her purse. "Please take this. It has my direct number and Mr. Sterling's assistant's contact information. He will be in touch." Sarah took the card, feeling a strange mix of apprehension and surprise. It was thick, embossed with a silver crest, clearly not the kind of card she usually encountered. "Thank you," she managed, tucking it into the pocket of her apron. The police concluded their preliminary investigation, promising to review security footage from nearby businesses and put out an alert for the suspect. Arthur, after being examined by paramedics who confirmed he was physically unharmed, though very shaken, was finally taken home by a still distraught Miss Albright. Before they left, Arthur, from the safety of Miss Albright's arms, gave Sarah a shy, heartfelt wave. Sarah waved back a lump forming in her throat. The rest of the day at the corner cafe was subdued. The initial shock slowly wore off, replaced by a lingering tension. The other waitresses offered Sarah sympathetic pats on the back and words of admiration. "You're a hero, Sarah," her colleague Brenda said, shaking her head in wonder. By closing time, Sarah was utterly exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She cleaned her section, locked up, and began the short walk home to her modest apartment, the Arizona sun finally beginning its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues. The business card Miss Albright had given her felt like a small alien weight in her apron pocket. She tried to put the morning's events out of her mind, but the image of the man's cold eyes and Arthur's terrified face replayed itself. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act, but something more deliberate, more sinister. The next morning, Wednesday, August 16th. Sarah arrived at work, bracing herself for more questions, more hushed conversations. But the cafe seemed to have returned to its usual rhythm, albeit with a slightly more appreciative atmosphere towards Sarah. Her regulars offered extra smiles, a few left larger tips, and Mr. Henderson even bought her a coffee. Just as she was wiping down the counter after the morning rush, her phone, tucked into her apron pocket, vibrated. It was an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be the police with an update, she answered. "Hello. Is this Sarah Jenkins?" A smooth, professional female voice asked, with a crisp, authoritative tone. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Ms. Jenkins, my name is Victoria Sterling. I am the personal assistant to Mr. Richard Sterling." Sarah's heart gave a little jolt. Richard Sterling, the billionaire dad. "Mr. Sterling would like to express his profound gratitude for your courageous actions yesterday morning. He would be honored if you could join him for a private meeting at his residence tomorrow, Thursday, August 17th, at 10:00 a.m. Sarah was stunned. A private meeting at his residence. This was far beyond a simple "thank you." "Oh," she stammered, caught off guard. I don't know. I have work." "Mr. Sterling is aware of your work schedule." "Ms. Jenkins." Victoria Sterling's voice remained impeccably polite, but firm. "Arrangements have already been made with the owner of the Corner Cafe for your absence. He insists on this meeting." Sarah's jaw dropped. Richard Sterling had already cleared her schedule. The sheer power of that action was staggering. It wasn't a request. It was an expectation. "Oh, okay then," Sarah managed, feeling a sudden rush of nerves. "Yes, I can be there." "Excellent. A car will pick you up at your address at 9:30 a.m. sharp. Please be ready." And with that, the line went dead. Sarah slowly lowered her phone, her mind reeling. A car pick her up. This was utterly surreal. She, Sarah Jenkins, waitress from the Corner Cafe, was going to meet Richard Sterling, the legendary reclusive tech magnate. She looked around the familiar, comforting chaos of the cafe, then down at her grease-stained apron. Her world, it seemed, was about to tilt on its axis. What on earth did a man like Richard Sterling want with a woman like her? The mystery only deepened. The following morning, Sarah stood in front of her modest apartment building, nervously smoothing the wrinkles from her best and only decent dress. A simple navy blue shift she usually reserved for rare social occasions. Her practical work shoes had been swapped for a pair of slightly scuffed but clean ballet flats. She felt utterly out of place even before the car arrived. Punctually at 9:30 a.m., a sleek black limousine, so polished it gleamed under the morning sun, pulled up to the curb. It was ridiculously out of place on her quiet residential street. A smartly uniformed chauffeur with a polite but serious demeanor stepped out and opened the back door for her. "Ms. Jenkins?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Yes," Sarah whispered, feeling a surge of unreality. This was really happening. She slid into the luxurious leather seat, feeling the soft give of the upholstery beneath her. The interior was spacious, hushed, and smelled faintly of expensive leather and something subtly floral. There was a mini fridge stocked with bottled water and a tablet displaying news headlines. Sarah felt like she had stepped onto a movie set. The drive was short, but it took her away from the familiar urban sprawl of Phoenix into the exclusive hilly enclaves where the city's elite resided. Manicured lawns gave way to sprawling estates, hidden behind imposing gates and high walls their presence only hinted at by glimpses of towering trees and ornate architecture. The limousine eventually turned into a long, winding driveway, passing through a grand wrought-iron gate that slowly swung open as they approached. The drive was lined with meticulously sculpted hedges and ancient olive trees, leading to a truly breathtaking sight. Richard Sterling's residence wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, a modern architectural marvel seamlessly blended with classic southwestern design. Built into the side of a hill, it boasted panoramic views of the entire valley. Walls of glass alternated with warm, earthy stone, and the entire structure seemed to glow with an understated power. A massive, intricately carved wooden door marked the entrance. The chauffeur opened the door for her, and Sarah stepped out, feeling utterly overwhelmed. The air here felt different, cleaner somehow. A pristine silence hung over the estate, broken only by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Before she could even register her surroundings fully, the massive front door swung open silently. Victoria Sterling, the personal assistant with the crisp voice, stood in the doorway, a polite but unreadable expression on her face. She was even more impeccably dressed in person, radiating an aura of quiet efficiency. "Ms. Jenkins, welcome to the Sterling residence," she said, her voice as smooth as ever. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you." Sarah followed Victoria into an entryway that was more grand foyer than simple hall. High ceilings, polished travertine floors, and a stunning contemporary art piece dominated the space. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end art gallery. Victoria led her through a labyrinth of hallways, each adorned with impressive artwork and tasteful minimalist furniture. Sarah felt a growing sense of intimidation, her small-town cafe world feeling light years away. She smoothed her dress again, suddenly acutely aware of her slightly scuffed shoes. They finally arrived at a large, sun-drenched study, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering the same spectacular view of the valley. A massive, sleek desk dominated the center of the room, adorned with multiple monitors and a scattering of important-looking documents. Behind the desk, rising from his chair as they entered, was Richard Sterling. He was not what Sarah had expected. The media often painted him as a ruthless, almost robotic genius. But the man who greeted her was surprisingly approachable, though undeniably imposing. He was in his late 40s with distinguished silver temples and sharp, intelligent eyes that were a surprisingly warm shade of hazel. He wore an expensive but casual linen shirt and dark trousers. He exuded an aura of calm authority, but there was also a discernible weariness in his eyes, a hint of the immense burden he carried. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice deep and resonant, extending a hand across the desk. "Thank you for coming. Please call me Richard." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "It's Sarah, sir. Thank you for having me. Please have a seat." He gestured to a comfortable-looking armchair facing his desk. Victoria discreetly exited the room, leaving them alone. Sarah sat feeling like a tiny fish in a very large pond. Richard returned to his chair, leaning back, his gaze steady and intense. "First and foremost, Sarah," he began, his voice serious, "I want to express my deepest, most profound gratitude for what you did for Arthur. Miss Albright has recounted the events in detail. You acted with incredible courage and selflessness. You saved my son." His words were direct, heartfelt, and utterly sincere. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. I just did what I thought was right, Richard. Anyone would have." He shook his head slowly. "Not everyone, Sarah. Not everyone has the courage to intervene, especially when faced with a potentially dangerous individual. Many would have frozen or called for help from a distance. You put yourself in harm's way for a child who was a complete stranger to you." He paused, his gaze softening slightly. "Arthur told Miss Albright that you were his superhero. He won't stop talking about you." A small, genuine smile touched Sarah's lips. "He's a sweet boy. Very polite." Richard nodded, a faint smile gracing his own lips. "He is, and he's everything to me. His mother, she passed away a few years ago. Arthur is all I have left of her." A shadow of pain crossed his features, quickly masked. "Which brings me to why I asked you here." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, his hands clasped. "Sarah, what you did cannot be repaid with mere words. I want to offer you more than just a thank you. I want to offer you a way to truly make a difference, not just for Arthur, but for your own life if you choose." Sarah's heart began to thump with a nervous anticipation. What was he getting at? A job offer? Some kind of charity donation in her name? Her mind raced through possibilities, none of which seemed to fit the gravitas of his tone. "I don't understand, Richard," she admitted, her brow furrowing. He smiled, a genuine warm smile this time that softened his sharp features. "Let me explain. As you might imagine, Arthur's safety is my absolute paramount concern. This incident, it was a wake-up call. We've had security measures in place, but clearly they weren't enough. I need someone truly dedicated, truly trustworthy, someone with your instincts and your heart to be a constant presence in his life." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Sarah, I want to offer you a position. Not as a nanny. Miss Albright handles the more formal aspects of his care and education, but as Arthur's personal guardian, his dedicated companion. You would be responsible for his well-being, his safety, his general happiness. You would be his superhero every day." Sarah stared at him, dumbfounded. The words registered, but her mind struggled to process them. Arthur's personal guardian. It was an incredible, utterly unexpected offer. "But I'm just a waitress," she stammered, feeling completely inadequate. "I don't have any experience in this kind of thing. I'm not trained security." Richard chuckled softly. "Security can be learned, Sarah. Loyalty, courage, and genuine care for a child, those cannot be taught. You possess those in spades. And as for being just a waitress, I've observed you through Miss Albright's reports and even from a distance. You run that cafe floor like a general. You're organized, attentive, quick thinking, and you genuinely care about people. Those are invaluable qualities." He continued, his voice persuasive. "The compensation would be substantial, enough to free you from financial worries to pursue any education or training you desire. You would live here in a dedicated staff apartment with all expenses covered. Your primary focus would be Arthur, escorting him to school, to playdates, making sure he's always safe and happy. You would essentially become an extended member of our household, our family. Sarah was speechless. Live here, with him, with Arthur. The idea was utterly insane, yet strangely compelling. The financial freedom alone was a dream she'd never dared to fully entertain. No more aching feet, no more worrying about rent, no more scraping by. But beyond that, there was Arthur. The thought of protecting him, of being that constant, reassuring presence, resonated deeply within her. I don't know what to say. She finally managed her voice, barely a whisper. Say yes, Sarah. Richard said, a hopeful glint in his eyes. Say yes, and let me finally give you the opportunity you deserve. An opportunity to make a real difference for Arthur and for yourself. The proposition hung in the air, weighty and transformative. Sarah Jenkins, the waitress from the corner cafe, was being offered a chance to step into a completely different world. A world of unimaginable wealth, profound responsibility, and a connection to a small boy who had, somehow, in a single terrifying moment, become incredibly important to her. Her life as she knew it was about to change forever. Sarah said yes. The transition from the corner cafe to the Sterling estate was, as expected, a whirlwind. Within a week, she had moved her sparse belongings into a beautifully appointed staff apartment on the sprawling property. It was larger and more luxurious than any place she had ever lived, with a small kitchenette, a comfortable bedroom, and a private patio overlooking a serene garden. The first few weeks were a steep learning curve. She underwent basic self-defense training, learned about the estate's extensive security systems, and was briefed on Arthur's routine, his preferences, and the intricacies of navigating life within the Sterling household. Victoria Sterling, while efficient, was also surprisingly supportive, providing guidance and answering Sarah's myriad questions with patience. Arthur, for his part, seemed genuinely thrilled to have Sarah around. His initial shyness slowly melted away, replaced by a quiet affection. He would follow her around, holding her hand, showing her his favorite toys and telling her about his day. Sarah found herself quickly growing fond of the perceptive, kind-hearted boy. He had a wisdom beyond his years, a resilience born from early loss, but also a deep capacity for joy and curiosity. Richard Sterling, true to his word, was a man of his word. He treated Sarah with respect, not as a servant, but as a vital member of his household team. He often joined them for meals, and Sarah began to see glimpses of the man beyond the billionaire persona, a devoted father, a man burdened by immense responsibilities, but also capable of surprising warmth and even a dry wit. One evening, Sarah found herself in the sprawling library, helping Arthur pick out a bedtime story. Richard entered, looking tired, a stack of reports in his hand. He stopped watching Sarah read to Arthur, a soft smile on his face. "He really adores you, Sarah," Richard said, his voice quiet. Sarah looked up, a natural smile gracing her features. "He's a wonderful boy, Richard. It's easy to adore him. And you're doing an incredible job," he continued, walking closer. "His mood has improved significantly since you arrived. He seems happier, more secure." He paused, his gaze meeting hers. "Thank you. Truly." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about the money or the luxurious surroundings. It was about making a difference, about being needed or truly valued. However, beneath the surface of this new, seemingly idyllic life, a subtle current of unease persisted. The police investigation into the attempted abduction had hit a dead end. The man had vanished without a trace. No security camera footage had yielded clear identification, and his motives remained unknown. The police suspected he might have been a low-level criminal, perhaps hired by someone, but there was no concrete evidence. Richard privately was more concerned. He believed the attack was targeted, not random. "I've made powerful enemies over the years, Sarah." He had confided in her one evening, his voice grim. "Business rivals, disgruntled former employees. The list is long. Whoever hired that man wanted to get to me through Arthur. It's a cruel tactic." Sarah took his words to heart. Her vigilance intensified. Every stranger was viewed with suspicion. Every shadow held a potential threat. She accompanied Arthur everywhere, from his private tutoring sessions to supervised playdates with other children from equally affluent families. She became a silent, ever-present guardian, a watchful shadow. One afternoon, a few months into her new role, Sarah was supervising Arthur during an art class held at the estate by a visiting tutor, Mrs. Gable. Not the cafe Mrs. Gable, but a different, much more refined one. Arthur was engrossed in painting a vibrant landscape, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sarah, seated nearby, was casually scrolling through her phone, checking a local news app. Her eyes skimmed past an article about a recent string of high-end burglaries in the Phoenix area, focusing on the details of a community fundraiser. Suddenly, a photograph accompanying the burglary article caught her eye. It was a grainy, slightly blurred image from a distant security camera, showing a man walking away from one of the recently targeted homes. Sarah's breath hitched. Her blood ran cold. The man in the photo, the shape of his shoulders, the way he held his head, even the nondescript jacket he wore. It was eerily familiar. The angle was poor, and his face was obscured by shadow, but Sarah felt an instant, undeniable prickle of recognition. It was him, the man from the corner cafe. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She stared at the photo, then zoomed in, trying to find more details. The article mentioned that the police suspected a professional, highly organized criminal group, not just petty thieves. This man was described as a person of interest in one of the burglaries, but they had no name, no solid leads. Sarah felt a wave of icy dread wash over her. If this was indeed the same man, what did it mean? Was he just a common criminal who had stumbled upon Arthur, or was there a deeper connection? Was he still looking for Arthur? Was he still a threat? Her mind flashed back to Richard's words. "I've made powerful enemies. Whoever hired that man wanted to get to me through Arthur." This discovery changed everything. It transformed a past incident into a current active danger. The man wasn't just a ghost. He was still out there, possibly lurking. And if he was involved in organized crime, his resources, his connections could be far more extensive and dangerous than anyone had imagined. Sarah closed the article, her hands shaking slightly. She had to tell Richard. Immediately. This was too important to keep to herself. The quiet peace of the Sterling estate suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable. The hidden threat, it seemed, was not so hidden anymore. Sarah found Richard in his study, engrossed in a video conference. She waited patiently until he concluded the call, her heart still thumping with a mixture of fear and urgency. "Richard, I need to show you something," she said, her voice taut with suppressed emotion, holding out her phone with the news article. Richard took the phone, his brow furrowing, as he saw the headline and the blurry image. He began to read, his expression growing increasingly grim with each sentence. He zoomed in on the photo, then looked up at Sarah, his eyes sharp and questioning. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I can't be 100% the photo isn't clear enough," Sarah admitted. "But the build, the posture, the jacket, it's almost identical. It just feels right, Richard. I felt it in my gut the moment I saw it." Richard handed the phone back to her, his jaw tightening. "This is bad, Sarah. Very bad." If this man is connected to an organized crime ring, and he was involved in Arthur's attempted abduction. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. The stakes were far higher than they had initially believed. "What do you think it means?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It means what I've suspected all along," Richard said, getting up and walking to the panoramic window, staring out at the expansive view he now saw as a potential vulnerability. This wasn't random. It was a targeted attack. And if he's involved in these burglaries, it's possible he was casing the cafe, or even already keeping an eye on Arthur, looking for an opportune moment. He turned back to her, his gaze intense. "I need you to tell me everything you remember about him, every detail, no matter how small. And then we're taking this to the police. But this time, we'll have more than just an eyewitness account. We'll have a potential connection to a known criminal enterprise." Sarah spent the next hour meticulously recounting every detail she could recall about the man, from the intensity of his gaze to the type of keys he held. Richard listened, taking notes, his mind clearly racing. Later that day, Richard involved his own high-powered security team, led by a former FBI agent named David Riley, who had been working to enhance the estate's defenses since the incident. Together, they presented the new evidence to the Phoenix Police Department. The new lead invigorated the investigation. The police, now with a potential link to the known burglary ring, began to connect the dots. The person of interest in the burglary case became a primary suspect in Arthur's attempted abduction. Forensics on the cafe booth yielded a faint fingerprint, previously dismissed as inconclusive due to smudging, but now being re-examined with renewed focus. Days turned into a tense week. Sarah felt the weight of the developing situation, her protective instincts heightened to an almost unbearable degree. She rarely left Arthur's side, constantly scanning her surroundings, ever vigilant. Then the breakthrough came. The fingerprint from the cafe booth, combined with new forensic techniques and cross-referencing with other criminal databases, yielded a match. The man was identified as Arthur "Artie" Finch, a known associate of a notorious, albeit low-profile, criminal organization operating in the Southwest, specializing in high-value asset retrieval and, as the police now suspected, kidnapping for ransom. Artie Finch. The name sent a chill down Sarah's spine. It put a name and a face, albeit a blurry one, to the terrifying shadow that had haunted her. The police immediately launched a manhunt. But before they could apprehend him, another chilling development occurred. A ransom note was delivered to the Sterling estate. It was discreetly left in the mailbox, clearly designed to bypass the initial layers of security. It was typewritten anonymous and chillingly specific. It demanded an astronomical sum of money, hundreds of millions, in exchange for Arthur's future safety, and threatened dire consequences if the Sterlings went to the authorities. The note also contained a specific unnerving detail. It mentioned the waitress from the cafe, praising her bravery, but warning that next time she wouldn't be so lucky. It was a direct threat, not just to Arthur, but to Sarah as well. Richard was furious, his face a mask of cold, controlled rage. "They've been watching us," he growled, clutching the note. "They know about Sarah. This isn't just about money. It's about making a statement, about exerting control." The police, now fully aware of the scale of the threat, brought in the FBI. The investigation was escalated to a national level. Richard, however, was not content to simply wait. He activated his own extensive network of contacts, including former intelligence operatives and cybersecurity experts, to try and track down the perpetrators. The pressure mounted. Sarah felt a crushing sense of responsibility. She had uncovered the link, and now she too was a target. But instead of retreating, Her resolve hardened. She would not let them get to Arthur. She would not let them win. One evening, as Sarah was putting Arthur to bed, he looked up at her, his innocent blue eyes full of trust. "Sarah," he whispered, "are we safe here?" Sarah's heart ached. She forced a reassuring smile. "Of course, sweetheart. We're always safe. You have lots of people looking out for you." She hugged him tightly, the small, fragile body, a potent reminder of why she was here, why she wouldn't give up. Richard, meanwhile, was working tirelessly often through the night, alongside his security team and the authorities. They were meticulously tracking every lead, every digital footprint, trying to identify the mastermind behind the abduction attempt and the ransom demand. The stakes were clear. It was a race against time. A powerful criminal organization was targeting a child, and they were willing to use any means necessary. Sarah, the former waitress, now found herself on the front lines of a high-stakes battle, a silent guardian against a very real and dangerous enemy. The hidden threat had finally surfaced, and its true depths were far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The manhunt for Artie Finch and his associates was intense and far-reaching. The FBI, working in conjunction with Richard's private security team, utilized every available resource. Digital forensics traced the ransom note's origin to a burner account, which in turn led them to a series of encrypted communications. It was a tangled web, but the collective efforts slowly, meticulously began to unravel it. After what felt like an agonizing eternity, but was in reality just over 3 weeks, the breakthrough came. A raid coordinated across 3 states simultaneously targeted several safe houses and known meeting points of the criminal organization. Artie Finch and several of his key associates were apprehended in a dusty remote warehouse just outside of El Paso, Texas. The mastermind, however, remained elusive. The leader of the organization was a shadowy figure known only as the Architect, a brilliant but ruthless individual who had built an empire on illicit activities, including high-stakes kidnapping. With Finch in custody, the police and FBI were able to piece together the full scope of the plot. The Architect had indeed targeted Arthur, seeing him as the ultimate leverage against Richard Sterling, whose vast wealth and influence they hoped to exploit. Artie Finch had been tasked with the initial surveillance and abduction attempt, chosen for his ruthlessness and his ability to blend in. The ransom note was merely the first step in a long, drawn-out extortion scheme. The news of Finch's capture brought a wave of immense relief to the Sterling household. Arthur, though still too young to fully grasp the danger he had been in, sensed the change in atmosphere. Richard, for the first time in weeks, allowed himself to visibly relax, the lines of stress around his eyes softening. Sarah felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. The constant vigilance, the gnawing fear. It all began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph and relief. She had played a crucial role, and Arthur was safe. A few days after Finch's arrest, Richard called Sarah into his study. The atmosphere was different this time, lighter, more celebratory. He motioned for her to sit, a genuine warm smile on his face. "Sarah," he began, his voice filled with sincere emotion. "Thanks to you, Arthur is safe. Thanks to your courage, your quick thinking, and your relentless pursuit of the truth, we were able to bring those men to justice. You didn't just save him that day at the cafe. You helped us uncover the entire plot." Sarah blushed, looking down at her hands. "I just did my job, Richard." He chuckled softly. "You did far more than your job, Sarah. You became an invaluable part of our lives, our family. And that's why I've been thinking very carefully about how to truly express my gratitude." He leaned forward, his gaze intense but kind. "The initial offer I made you, the position as Arthur's guardian, was born out of a desperate need to protect him. And you excelled at it beyond my wildest expectations. but I now realize that was just the beginning. You have shown me a depth of character, an intelligence, and a drive that deserves so much more." Sarah looked at him, her heart starting to beat a little faster. She had no idea what was coming. "Sarah," Richard continued, his voice gaining a serious, almost reverent tone, "I want to offer you a new path, a new future. I've observed your innate problem-solving skills, your attention to detail, your ability to manage complex situations under pressure. These are qualities that are incredibly valuable not just in personal security, but in the world of business." He paused, letting his words sink in. "My company, Sterling Innovations, is constantly looking for sharp, ethical minds. We're launching a new, philanthropic initiative focusing on underprivileged youth and educational opportunities, particularly in underserved communities like the one you came from. It's a project that is very close to my heart." He met her gaze directly. "I want to offer you a senior position within that initiative, a role where you can use your passion, your intelligence, and your unique perspective to truly make a difference on a much larger scale. We would provide all the necessary training, a comprehensive education package to get you any degree you desire, completely funded, of course, and a salary that would ensure you never have to worry about financial stability again." Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. A senior position, an education. This was beyond anything she could have ever dreamed. Her mind reeled with the sheer magnitude of the offer. It wasn't just money, it was an investment in her potential, in her future. "Richard, I don't know what to say," she stammered, tears pricking at her eyes. It's unbelievable." He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "You deserve it, Sarah. You have earned it. You are family now, and I believe you have the potential to achieve truly remarkable things." And the reward didn't stop there. Beyond the career opportunity and the education, Richard had a more truly unbelievable gesture. "And finally, Sarah," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his desk drawer. He opened it, revealing a shimmering, exquisite diamond pendant, an antique piece clearly of immense value. This was Arthur's mother's. She always believed in the power of a kind heart. "I want you to have it, as a token of our eternal gratitude and a symbol of the courage and love you brought into our lives." Sarah stared at the pendant, then at Richard, then back at the pendant, utterly speechless. It was a priceless heirloom, a gesture of profound trust and affection, not just from Richard, but from the memory of Arthur's mother. It was a symbol of acceptance into their most private, most cherished circle. Her journey had taken her from the familiar clatter of diner plates to the hushed elegance of a billionaire's estate, from a simple act of bravery to a new horizon of opportunity and purpose. The waitress who protected a child from a stranger had in return received a reward that was truly unbelievable, not just in its monetary value, but in its transformative power. Her life, irrevocably changed, was now filled with the promise of a future she had only dared to dream of. And so the story of Sarah Jenkins, the unassuming waitress who became a superhero, comes to a close, or rather a new beginning. Her courage that ordinary Tuesday morning didn't just save a child, it unraveled a dangerous plot and in turn unlocked a destiny she never imagined. From the sizzling bacon of the corner cafe to the gleaming halls of Sterling Innovations, Sarah's journey reminds us that bravery comes in many forms, and true kindness is always seen, always valued. Her unbelievable reward wasn't just about money, it was about recognition, opportunity, and the profound impact one person can have. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in everyday heroes, and unexpected turns of fate. Please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. What do you think you would have done in Sarah's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.